Hello, here I am back again with a wonderful group of people for our Underrepresented in Tech webinar series. And it's just such an honor to have the three of you today. So I'm here today with Milan Ivanovic, Shusei Toda, and Romine Cavalcante. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to have you introduce yourself so people know who we're talking to. Our group today, our focus is on people for whom English is not their primary language. So I think it's wonderful. I'm learning Spanish. I'm also almost up to 1,000 days on Duolingo learning Spanish, but I cannot speak Spanish as clearly as I want to say easily, although I don't know how language acquisition was for you. But you all are at least bilingual, if not more than that, which you possibly could be. But thank you for being able to communicate with me in my language today and to be able to tell everybody else what that feels like in the tech community. So, Milan, I am going to start with you. Go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for the intro and thanks for the invite. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Yeah, Milan. I'm based in Belgrade, Serbia. Father of one boy, and we recently, just like 2 days ago, we found out that my wife is carrying another boy. We were actually hoping for a baby girl, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we wanted like one of each. But yeah, my primary language is Serbian. As a kid, I learned a little bit of German because all my relatives on my mother's side, they lived in Austria. So I was just like visiting my grandparents a lot. But yeah, soon I realized that life is too short to learn German. That's why I switched to English because of all the movies and the music. So yeah.
Well, thanks for being here today. Shusei, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Happy to be here again, too. My name is Shusei, and I am based in Tokyo, Japan. And yes, I am in Japan, and my native language is Japanese. And I speak a little bit of Spanish also. And my secondary language will be English as of topic of today. I grew up in the United States when I was little. So that's when I learned English. And, funny story is I had like several years that I had forgotten my native language. And now that I'm based in Tokyo again, I use Japanese mostly every day and English sometimes, but my work is in English. So uh, that's me. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. Romine, over to you.
Thank you for the invite. I'm based in Brazil, on São Paulo State. As you know, my primary language is Portuguese, not equal as Portugal, it's a different one, the Brazilian Portuguese. About English, here in Brazil, it's a bit common to children to learn it early because we use it a lot on the exam to the college. So you need to choose between, at least on when I started doing, it's different now, but some years ago, you needed to choose between English and Spanish. So a lot of people started learning really early. It was a bit difficult here in Brazil because we don't have anybody to exercise your English. So it's really different if somebody starts, like when I started learning, I think I did 9 years of course of English. And yet, when I started my first job in a global company, it was like I was talking to aliens because I didn't know how to speak well, even the accent. So it's really different, like to really learn from somebody that you can talk with than doing a course in a country that nobody really speaks it, just like an exercise, let's say. And I live in a small farm with a lot of pets, like really a lot of pets. I think dogs, 3 cats, 2 bunnies, a lot of chickens, things like that.
That's one of the first things we learn when we learn a second language is the names of animals. I don't know why, but that's one of the first things that they teach you, right?
Exactly.
One of my favorite things I studied I took French classes in high school, and the favorite thing was to learn what does it sound like when somebody in another language says what their animal says. So like we would say in English woof, but in French it's waf waf, so it's always different, and I always get a kick out of that. But that's not what we're here to talk about. So Let me get into our first question, which is, what do you wish people knew or understood about what it's like to be a non-native English speaker in tech?
Well, as we all can imagine, every single like elements or the words are different in each language. So like if you say computer, maybe that's popular around the world, but if you get deeper into the tech, like some of the words are different in other languages. And it's easy for non-English speakers to understand in their native language, but like if it's spoken in English, like the words come out of English, sometimes people get confused. So that's like, I wish people knew more. Like a lot of people knows about this, but like more people, it's should be broad known that each how we call elements in other languages is different around the world. And as English is like the most used language around the world, people speak in different speeds. So like the faster you speak, it is harder to understand. But the slower you speak, it might be easy for others to understand. So like, I think a lot of people knows about this, but I wish, like this could be like more known broadly so that, we all could be like, let's say nice to each other, maybe. Like four of us here, we all speak English and we speak in this a little normal speed, but like some people are fast and sometimes that could get tricky, I would say.
I have been accused of speaking fast my whole life, so I will try to be cognizant of that going forward.
You're fine.
I
You're fine.
no,
You're
but I
fine.
still appreciate that, because sometimes I'm on a stage giving a talk where everybody in the audience is not following English as quickly as others might be able to. And so that's such a good tip, not just one-on-one, but when you're talking to an audience, to remember that no matter how nervous you are, you should slow down your talk a little bit.
I do agree with Shusei. I think another tip that I can give to is to people non-native, because, for example, in Brazil, people ask too much from them to be able to talk perfectly the English. And after I started working in a global company, I noticed that we don't need to be the perfect native English speaker. Like, we just need to be able to understand each other. And I think we need to be more kind to ourselves. Like, a lot of people sometimes ask too much of others. Like, you need to be perfect, you need to speak really, really well. But it's not really like that. Even when I went to USA, as I said to you, I didn't speak that much. I learned how to, but I didn't know how to speak to a native, because it's different, because of the accent and the way to talk. And everybody was kind to me. Everybody was understandable. And even in a different country, like if I didn't know how to even count coins, everybody was really kind to me to explain. While people in Brazil were, no, you need to know this kind of stuff, but no, you don't need to know this kind of stuff. You can be kind to yourself. You were able to not know something, or to ask to repeat something because you didn't understand, or ask to explain in another way because you didn't understand it. So just, you don't need to ask that much from you. You can be kind to yourself.
I think that's really good advice. Absolutely. It's absolutely to make sure that you are comfortable with yourself and that you give yourself some grace and some room to, because you're learning, right? We're always all learning all the time. And especially when you are in that more acquisition state of learning another language, to be kind and gentle to yourself. I think that's really good advice. Milan.
Yeah. So we studied British English. Like we started at fifth grade when I was going to the elementary school. Now it's from the first grade. Even my kids now in the kindergarten, they will start with English. Even the age 3, I think, or 4, they're already like starting. But with all the YouTube and all the videos, my kid is already doing like yellow, like no juta. Like in Serbian, it's jut, like no yellow. And when he falls, he's like, oh no, like in English. But yeah, well, on Shusei, on Shusei, just to add, like on speeds, I have personally, I have troubles understanding the Aussie English, like the from Australia, when they talk like no, I no, just can't do it, because of all the movies and Hollywood and Disney, like the closest English to me is the U.S. English, for British English, like even though we grew up with BBC shows like in Serbia, but it's harder for me just like to it's not pavement, it's always going to be sidewalk, it's never going to be like those kinds of things, like it's never going to be it's trash, it's not like the bin. So just those things, like yeah, I wish when conversations actually happen that like don't, if you have at least someone from who's like non-native, don't use slang and that much, and just like don't just pace yourself, even though when we talk about some subjects, the speed of how fast we are actually talking really depends on how passionate are we on the subject. So yeah, if you see someone that is like really passionate to try to explain something about like let's say about WordPress or whichever, like the things that happen on holidays, they just like speed up with a passion. If you see have someone who's not native, just like yeah, be understanding and just pace yourself. But yeah.
It's funny that you bring up trash versus bin. The first time I ever logged into a website that had been built, a WordPress website that had been built in the UK, I was looking for trash to delete something, and then I realized it didn't say trash, it said bin right in the website itself, and I was like, never occurred to me that would be the case, because it's still English, but yes, it's a different part of it, a different style of English, if you will. Yeah, for sure. What is the biggest challenge that's facing you and others like you, as non-native English speakers in technology right now? What would you say is something that's, I don't want to say a struggle necessarily, but a challenge for you?
I can take on that. The biggest challenge is for me to actually talk about some tech stuff in Serbian, because when I learned all the things, when I read all the books, like all the tutorials, they were like in English. So when I do a talk, like my slides need to be in English for me to understand it, for me to know, even though the talk is in Serbian, the slides need to be in English, because if I see other than plugins, it's going to be like they're like Serbian translation for that, even though I was the one who like did the actual translation in Serbian. I'll be like, what was the thing that I wanted to talk about here? Like, oh, it's plugins. Then I switch back to English, and then I do. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge that I'm facing. Just like now speaking my own language, the things that I learned, I would never say knees. It's always going to be array for me. So, and when I see knees or like in some Serbian translation of some, I'm like, I can't do it. Like I was about to fix my mother's phone, and it's in Serbian. I'll be like, you know what? I need to switch to English in order for me to set the ringtone, and then I'm gonna put it back in Serbian. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge, to understand things like now in my own language.
What a strange thing to have to do in your own head. And I imagine it almost feels like betraying your own language in some respect.
Funny thing, I kind of have the same thing as Milan. I have like everything set up in English, since English was the language I grew up in. So like when I had to set up my father and mother's iPad, I set it up in English. I pass it on to them. They're like, it's in English. How are you gonna make us use it in English? So I had to switch back to Japanese and stuff. So like switching the language in our heads. Well, that's like the challenge that I'm facing right now. So like, I'm thinking the first thing that comes to my mind is everything is in English, like the name of the plugin, let's say the WordPress plugin, or anything I want to say, it comes in English first. So I have to switch back to Japanese. But that's probably like my challenge as myself, like my challenge. But like to put this topic in a broader, wide range, I would say the biggest challenge that's facing the non-native English speaker in tech right now is some of the countries or the industry have their own ecosystem within itself. So like in Japan, we don't need English to live in the text industry. Like we can survive on our own only in Japanese. But if we started using English, the wide, if you think it globally, it's worldwide, and like there are a lot of unlimited possibilities, but people don't see that as an option. They just face what's in front of them, you know, communicate in Japanese, learn everything in Japanese, just work in Japanese. So like I would say that that's one of the challenges that we're facing in Japan right now. Like everybody should have at least have an option to think globally, but like consuming locally is the only thing that's been going on. And yeah, so it's kind of hard situation, and it's not something that I can fix myself, but like I wish that there could be more possibilities.
I think it's the same as Milan said, that sometimes I forget, words in Portuguese, and it's a bit confusing because it's my own language, and because of I'm more like speaking English now, it's common to forget something. And I don't know if it happens to you, but sometimes I talk to somebody in Slack, and later I get confused if I spoke in English or Portuguese. And I keep on thinking, oh my God, if I did the call speaking Portuguese, or if I mixed both languages and people didn't understand me. And sometimes I keep thinking about it, but I try to be cool. And I don't know if the same happens to you, because Portuguese, in the base, like when the language was created, we have a lot of words that are common in English, and we kind of do a Portuguese English thing. Like some words are similar, and sometimes when we don't remember, sorry, my chickens. If I don't remember a word, sometimes they're really similar to English, and I can kind of, just add an ed in the end, and it's going to be that word in English. But my boss already corrected me that not. We try to
you thought so.
English. Yeah, no, it's not correct. It's not that word. So yeah, sometimes like when I don't remember the word, sometimes I do a Portuguese English mixed language.
What are some
just if I may add, sorry, Michelle, I just remembered that I've seen like on TED Talk, and I just found the video because it's the how language shapes the way we think. Because when I'm like talking in English, and when I'm communicating in English, it's totally different the way how I structure the sentence, how I structure the words, how I express, than like in Serbian. And it's like the mental switch that happened to me once I moved to Norway, because I was just like translating everything in my head. When like communicating, I would just like speak basically the sentence in Serbian. I will literally translate it to English and then say it, and that sounded weird. And once I started, thinking in English and then just like speaking the way, then that's where the switch happened. And this is the TED Talk that's really explained. I'm like, aha, moment. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what's the thing. So yeah, that's the challenge as well.
So like we're talking about tech world, right, in this webinar, right? So we're all facing our PCs or MacBooks in front of us. When we look at our keyboards, well, me personally, I use the US keyboard because that's the one I grew up in. But like when we're in Japan, a lot of Japanese people use the Japanese language keyboards. And I'm pretty sure there are Portuguese keyboard layouts, Serbian keyboard layouts. And one funny thing is I always have to press command space or option space to switch between English and my native language. So like I try to type fast as I can, but like if the sentence includes English words and the Japanese words, it takes a lot of time. And like when somebody asks for help, like, hey, Shusei, can you help me with this? Here's my laptop. And then when I see the laptop, I'm like, oh my God, this is not the layout I know. And like those kind of like, it's not like a critical challenge or anything, but I find it a little bit funny that everybody's different and everybody has their own preference, and so not everybody is same. So like, I think everybody's having like their own preference, and I personally find it a little bit of challenge to find, switching the language and stuff. So like, we were talking about language switch, so I wanted to talk about
Yeah.
that.
And I would not have even known that. So, I mean, I've seen other keyboards, of course, but to think that they're even laid out differently would not have occurred to me because I've never had to use one. So I think that's a really good point. Thank you. When you think about the different kinds of tech organizations that you belong to, and even outside of tech, perhaps, what are some communities or organizations in tech that you see are doing things right, are doing things more inclusively for people whose first language is not English?
I've seen a lot of all the open source, at least the ones that I attend, like all the open source communities are aware of that. And like you will see either the talks or being transcribed, or they're using the translations, or even if it's like in Serbia, let's say, if we are having the meetup and we have a guest or at least one in the audience who doesn't speak Serbian or is like learning Serbian, we will always switch to the language, we will switch to English. And I like that. I like that, open source, all the open source communities, they are aware. And they are aware that we need to, if we are sitting around the table, we need to speak a language that all of us understands. Otherwise, it'd be like super weird. So yeah, I would add open source. I think that's the communities that's
For sure. Shusei, I'm gonna dig in a little bit more on this question with you. You were on the organizing team for WordCamp Asia, and somebody recently said to me, "If it was in Asia, why are all the talks in English?" So, I mean, I have an answer for that, but I'm wondering if it's your answer for that. Do you have a response for that?
That's a good question. And that's something that we faced in 2023, and that's something that we're facing in 2024 right now, the organizing team. Like, why are all the talks in English? Why isn't it in the local language, or let's say their native tongue? And I think there's two answers to it, like a simple answer and a little bit complex answer. And the simple answer is English is the most used language around the world. So it will be easier for the audience to understand. Just like what Milan said right now, like if the majority of the audience knows English, maybe the speaker should speak in that language or present in that language. So it should be easier to understand. And the complex answer is it takes time and money, Let's say we have a speaker in Japanese, we have a speaker in Hindi, we have a speaker in Taiwanese. Okay, it's gonna be pretty hard to find the caption or the translator who can do that simultaneously. So I think there's two sides to it from my opinion. Would
My
love to
question,
know what you think, Michelle.
so, well, I asked back to that person, I said, well, in Asia, there is not one language. And so which language would you choose? If you had to say it was going to be in maybe a track in another language and then a track in English, for example, what other language would you choose? Even in India, they don't all speak one language in India. So what would you choose, right? And so I think that there could be definitely benefits to having some talks in other languages. But if you were trying to streamline things so that the most people could get the most from it, then I think that having one general language and of course it benefits me, and I 100% realize that and say that out loud. But what language would you choose if you were going for an entire continent with probably thousands of languages included? So at least hundreds, if not thousands, which is included. But yeah, it's a good question, right? But Shusei, to go back to the main question, since I've got you on the hot seat right now, what are some organizations or communities that you think are doing things right to be more inclusive for language?
Just like what Milan said, the open source communities knows the situation around the world. Like there are a lot of languages, and people don't use the same language as everyone. But I'm particularly speaking about mainly the Asian countries, because I know a little bit more of I have a lot of communications between the Asian countries because of the WordCamp Asia organizing team. But a lot of these bilingual speakers within the community, they try to work as a connection between the local language speaker and the English speaker. Like they try to be a translator, they try to translate things into their local language so the people from locals would understand better. Like not everybody understands or studied English in their school life, and like they try to let people understand it, and they try to, like I myself, I try to be the translator when, let's say, we have guests from outside, overseas. I try to translate into English. I translate the English to Japanese, and I think like not just me, but like I see that in a lot of other communities. So I think having that connection between the language barriers is good, and I think that numbers will rise in the future.
Romine, how about you?
Well, I think that, well, I will already work to companies that kind of ask it too much of somebody that's not native about English. And that was a bit frustrating because I felt pressured to be perfect, let's say like that. And for example, in the company I'm working right now, people are more easy on this. Like if I don't know a word or vocabulary, I can just say the word in Portuguese and say, oh, I don't know, or let me check and translate. And it's going to be fine. There's no problem at all because you don't need to know everything. And yeah, like almost the same advice I gave on the previous question, that companies should be more kind to their people that's not native, because obviously you can have the most perfect English, still you won't know everything. You still will be there things that you don't know how to speak or how to express. And yeah, just be patient and encourage people to get better every day, things like that. I think is the key to everybody being able to not be shy to communicate, because if you put too pressure, people start to be shy and talk less, and that's not really the scenario we want.
When Google Translate became a thing that I could have on my phone, my life opened up to be able to communicate with others. But again, English is my primary language, and most people are able to speak to me in the circles that I am in my primary language. Not all of my family. For example, I have family in Puerto Rico who speak Spanish so quickly that I just like, it's like watching the fire trucks go by to the fire. It's so quick. And so I'm constantly like, but I'm wondering, Google Translate made things so much easier. And now that you can even speak into your phone and have it translate, and it's pretty good. But what do you think about like AI? I didn't have this question in advance. It's something that's popped into my head, especially as Romine was talking about being able to translate and things like that. Are you using AI at all to help you craft messages to customers or within your organizations or to others? And is that a game changer at all, using ChatGPT or something to be able to write something so that it sounds more like a native, English speaker might have written?
I have a fun story that happened like 30 minutes ago. So I'm here in co-working, and two other guys work here, friends. So they were just like talking about they need to send the client an email like in German, but they use the ChatGPT. They use the AI to put up that email. So they put it up in English, and then they used the switch to German, but not just like one-to-one translation as the Google Translate would do, just like do it in a proper German way, like the German voice, I would say. So yeah, but it was hard for three of us, just like looking at the screen, having no idea what it says. But to us, it looked amazing, perfect German, all the structures and everything. Yeah.
I think that's funny. I used to translate when I was directing emails back to customers, and they had written to me in Spanish or another language. I would take it to Google Translate. I would write my response, but I would always start it with, I'm using Google Translate. Please forgive any errors because it's not perfect. What about you, Shusei and Romine? Are you using AI at all or Google Translate? How is that working for you?
Well, actually, I didn't use ER, but I use Translate a lot, and it's most of vocabulary I don't know. Like sometimes I forgot a word, but I'm using Grammarly that was suggested by my boss. That can help too when we just write fast, and sometimes because obviously we're not native, we forget some grammar or something like that, and Grammarly goes there and just say, hey, you can write it better, and just check the suggestions, even to learn more about the language too. So it helps a lot.
Shusei, are you using AI at all for that?
Every day. I'm using it every day. Like, AI is becoming smarter day to day, and if we use AI too much, I'm a little bit afraid of what would come to the future. There's a bright side, but I'm also afraid what would come to the future. But having a better sentence is always better for me. So I try to write things up in my language, from the knowledge I know. Like I tried it write it in English, I write it down, and I put it in ChatGPT saying, "Hey, can you make this sound a little bit smarter?" He would ChatGPT would just return it to me, and I would read it. If I agree to it, I will send it that way. But if I don't agree it, I would say, maybe this sounds too smart. Make it a little bit less smarter. Like I'm playing around with it. I'm not using it to write it from 0 to 1. I'm trying to use the AI tool to make it from 1 to 10 or 10 to 100 more and more. So it's good. Like what Romine's mentioned, Grammarly, that helps a lot. My grammar is, although I grew up in US, my grammar is so terrible. I mistype everything. Like if I write down a paragraph in Google Docs, I would get the red underlines too much, and that would make me want to cry. But Grammarly is helping me a lot every day, and ChatGPT is helping a lot, and translations. The AIs, they are able to do the translations a lot, so I am using that a lot too. So yeah, it's been very helpful, and I think people should use it more.
I think it looks like a very resourceful tool for in a lot of ways. And I want you to know that very, very many native English speakers also type and write very poorly. You are not doing that. I'm not saying you write poorly, but most people will write something in Google Docs and see a ton of red squiggles. That's why we always write to the seventh to 10th grade level. Here, we're told to write that level because other people, if you get too smart, like you said, then people don't understand it anyway. So,
but have you seen recently that on YouTube now, like all the videos that are non-English, or you can just translate them, just like in the settings of the video, you can do the auto captions, I think, and you can do it in your language. So I did for a bunch of videos just to test it out, and it's really good translations, at least to Serbian. So I was just oh yeah, some things makes no sense when it's translating literally everything, even the Bruce Wayne, even the name, it will just try to translate the last name or whatever. But yeah, most of the time it's really good.
Yeah, it doesn't always get my name right when you are using auto transcripts. It called me instead of Frechette, it said something about fish once. Shellfish, that was. I said Michelle Frechette and it said shellfish. So yes, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. What kind of change would you love to see in the tech community to be more embracing of languages and people who might not speak English at all or are still acquiring multiple languages? What kind of change would you like to see either today or long term that might make things easier globally for people?
No, joking aside, we talked about Asia, WordCamp Asia, and we've seen a lot of attendees maybe coming from one country, speaking one language. So yeah, maybe, just maybe, we can think about like the tracks doing like in their own language or their workshops, or I don't know, like maybe, just maybe, it's a, yeah, it's a long shot, but yeah, maybe that, or just, I don't know. It's everything is fine, Michelle. Like, I like it. How why do we need to change the things all the time? Like, everything is fine.
Like the dog. Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's
I'm
fine. Yeah,
okay. Everything's fine.
I'm okay. I'm okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. This, like, I would say, like, the long term, we started this conversation in a good sense, like, just like a lot of understanding, like, from all the sides. Like, even though I never got anything like from the native speakers saying like, oh, like, they never commented like on my English or my pronunciation of, even though I switched to humor, saying like, it's a big word for me, I can't pronounce it, this is, no one said like, oh yeah, yeah, don't try. Like, everyone's like encouraging. So but yeah, educating, and the ones that are non-perfect speaking, whichever, that's, exactly the thing that Romine said, like, people would switch to being shy and they would stop communicating, educating them that it's okay, like, no one speaks perfect English, everyone is having, going through different phases. It's totally fine, it's totally okay for you to try. Like, don't stop, or don't put yourself down just because you don't know how to say a word or two, like in English. So yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, like yeah, the same as Mila said it, like just embrace more people, like non-native, because you know, even as you said, not everybody from USA knows how to speak English. Even here in Brazil, not everybody knows how to speak Portuguese. I was born here. So why do we need to ask people that is no native to speak perfectly, Like, we need to encourage people more to speak, to learn, because we won't learn if we try to speak, not being shy and prevent to try to speak. Yeah, I like this.
I agree with both Milan and Romain said, and like, just being nice to each other, like, encourage each other. Nobody's perfect, like, yes, like, let's say three of us here, like, this aside you, Michelle, like, we're non-native English speakers. We're like, yes, we're here, but we're not even perfect. We don't know some words. We don't know how to say things. Like, it's like, we're not perfect. We are able to speak a little bit more than somebody else, but everybody can be at this stage. And like, there's no differences. So like, be nice. And I would like, just like the talk you guys had about the having a native language track at some of the tech events. I think that's pretty nice. Like, why does it have to be in English as of like equalize or normalize thing? Like, and everybody wants to learn English, like, they want to speak English, but it's maybe good to encourage everybody that maybe speaking English is not the right choice all the time. Having your native language is sometimes better. You could express your feelings in different ways. You get to know a little bit more about things around the world. So, like, there's no right or wrong answer. So I think it's good. Like, I wouldn't want any changes, I would say. Like, it's good as it is.
It's interesting. WordCamp Montreal always has a separate language tracks for English and then Canadian French, which is not the same as France French, right? Just like we have English in the UK versus English in the US, of course. And I love that. And I have been there before as a vendor, as a sponsor, and had people come to me and I'm like, oh, I wish I could speak French. Like, yeah, I took it in high school 30 something years ago, but I don't have the recall to be able to speak French because I've never actually had to use it outside of a classroom. And so it was wonderful to have people there like Michelle Bluma, who was nearby and would translate for me when somebody had no ability to speak English. And this is before Google Translate was on your phone, so it wasn't as easy to do that. So the thing I would add probably is, especially as somebody who's only an English speaker going into other countries where English is not the primary language, is to make good friends. Have good friends who can help you and help you navigate. And that isn't always possible. I understand that. But if you have people in your life that you can ask questions of without feeling like you're, being terrible, or who won't laugh at you when you don't understand something. I think that we I think from what I've seen in tech, and especially within the WordPress community, we have a lot of people who are willing to help you along, whatever your primary language is and wherever in the world you are situated, because that's just who we are as people. So I want to ask you, are there any final thoughts? Did we not talk about something that you wish we would talk about? Do you have a tool or a piece of advice or any of that we can bring to this whole thing kind of full circle and end on those notes, the things that you want to share with other people?
So yeah, a piece of advice that practice makes it perfect, and just like go for it. No one will like stop you. No one will actually reach out saying like, I don't understand it. No one will be like persistent. Everyone will actually try to help you out, even though like it happened to me so many times, just like get stuck on words and like I don't know how to say it, and then there's like popping words and be like, that's not what I want to say, but yeah, thank you so much for helping out. But all in all, like yeah, practice makes this very perfect, especially for English. There's gotta be someone who understands, like who's gonna support you. So yeah, that's my piece of advice. Don't lock yourself in just because you're just like scrambling for a couple of words. It's totally fine. It's totally fine.
No, Milan said it all. I would say, just try. Like nobody's
He
gonna
stole my
criticize you.
answer.
Yeah, like nobody's gonna criticize one another because it's not fun to do that, and nobody's gonna be like happy hearing those things, saying those things. Like, but it's always great to see someone who's like trying to speak in like not in their non-native language, but like they're like trying so hard. Like if they're trying so hard, it makes me want to help them like a lot more. Like if they're like just like what Milan said, they're like going like this. They want to say something. They're thinking in their head. I'm like, are you trying to say this? Or are you trying to say that? Like, so like, don't be shy. Just try. Nobody's gonna harm you. And, just practice every day and have someone who can help you. Like what Michelle said, like, have let's say like a language mentor that you feel comfortable with, you could text that person, hey, I want to write this in English. Can you help me out create something in English and stuff? Because it's everybody's willing to help, I'm sure yeah,
Yeah, I think that's
Michelle and
true.
Milan, I think both of you, Romine, maybe you saw it online, but like our latest WordCamp Europe, I don't know if you two remember, but like our community. So at WordCamps, we have Contributor Day. What is called Contributor Day? Everybody from the community contributes to WordPress. And if you two remember, the community team table lead, we had Junko Nagaga from Japan. She couldn't speak English at all, like several years ago. But like she's trying hard every day, and she's doing it every day and every night. And when she found out that she's leading the table, she sent a Google Doc to me in Japanese. She's like, I want to write this in English so that I can post it in P2. Can you help me create English? And that was very courageous of her to saying that she's not able to do it. Can you help me out? And I wanted to say, hey, thank you for asking for help. I'm willing to help in any way as I can. So those kind of things. Be nice to each other. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And everybody's there to help each other. So
Yeah, and just adding something that Jose said, if you criticize people for not knowing how to speak perfectly, stop doing that. Please. It's not nice. Don't criticize. It's really, really bad.
I love that. Just stop doing that. Be nice, for sure. I think that's the best advice, for sure. And Milan, I don't want to correct you per se, but I do want to say practice makes better, in my opinion. None of us are, I was born, I've only spoken English my whole life. I am not perfect. So don't, as somebody who doesn't speak English as your first language, don't expect to ever speak perfect language, because none of us do. But practice makes better.
I love that. I love that.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you all so much for being with us today, for sharing your thoughts. I think that conversations like these are what helps everybody have that understanding, being helpful to one another, and just makes it all a better place. And I appreciate that you're willing to, and not in your primary language, come here and talk to us about what it's like to be a non-native English speaker in the tech community. So Milan, Shusei, Romine, thank you so much for being here today.